Hey everyone, and welcome back to Joey's Retro Handhelds. I'm Joey, and today we're going to be doing a bit of a different video than I'm used to. We're going to be looking at charts and benchmarks and all of that, because I'm going to take my ASUS ROG Ally X that is running the Z1 Extreme processor, and I'm actually having Bazite on here, and we're going to compare it to the new GPD Win 4 2025, and this is actually running the new AI9 HX370 processor from AMD. So I was curious, how does it compare on a performance aspect and a battery aspect? So those are the two things we're going to look at today. I'll be doing a whole separate video on an actual review for the GPD Win 4 2025. Today, I was just like playing with this, and I wanted to just see, in actuality, with scientific benchmarking, how does it actually compare to the ASUS ROG Ally X? Because I was seeing better performance, and I thought it might have been placebo, but it actually isn't. So let's get right into it, and we're going to look at a bunch of graphs, a bunch of numbers, a bunch of benchmarks. Both devices are running Bazite. Both devices running the same software, games, all of it. I made sure to make sure everything is still the same. So we have easily comparable numbers between the two to see which one is better from a performance aspect, by how much, and then we'll talk about battery as well. So let's start off in alphabetical order with Assassin's Creed Mirage. Orange in every chart is going to be the Ally X, and blue in every chart is going to be the Win 4. Now, FSR is set to native here, so no upscaling to speak of. But right off the bat, we can see that there's a clear winner here with the Win 4 making good gains over the Ally X at every single TDP and every graphic mode. And actually, if you look closer, the 18-watt TDP performance on the Win 4 beats out the Ally X's 28-watt TDP performance at every single graphic mode. The graphic modes that you see at the bottom of low, medium, and high are the in-game presets for graphics. Now, this one chart here is actually going to tell the story for every single of the upcoming charts, because as we jump into Assassin's Creed Origins, it is more of the same. The 18-watt performance of the Win 4 or the HX370 is staggeringly great here. You save 10 watts of battery and heat and everything to run the same games that the Ally X is doing at 28 watts of TDP, so at a much higher TDP. For Origins especially, this propels you into a capped 40 frame rate that just didn't exist before. Then we take a look at everybody's favorite benchmark game, Cyberpunk, and we are fully at 60 FPS, on low at 18 watts with FSR set to balanced. So we're not even at performance. But once again, it is straight gains across the board, and it is really telling the story that 18 watts with the HX370 is equal to about 28 watts on the Z1 Extreme. All of these charts are at 1080p as well, so if you wanted even more gains on top of changing FSR, you could drop it down to 720p, and you would probably bump up these numbers quite a bit even more too. Now, Horizon Zero Dawn Remastered showed the largest increases of any game that I've personally tested. We are at almost double frame rates in some cases, like for example the 28-watt low or even the 28-watt high. For most of the games that I've tested, it really is not worth it to go from 18 watts to 28 watts on the Win 4 with the HX370, as it's really kind of small increases. But this game at least seems to have a decent enough increase by raising the TDP. Immortals Fenyx Rising is a similar experience to Horizon. 10% or so FPS increases by shooting up the TDP to 28 watts. This is once again an example of a game that on the Ally X would be tough to have in the VRR range, or even capped to just 40 FPS if you wanted to on other devices. But on the HX370, you absolutely can. The Z1 Extreme always felt like it was on the cusp of perfect 40 FPS or 60 FPS for a lot of games. But the HX370 seems to surpass that and makes it a reality. And this story stayed the same for pretty much across every single game. If we look at Middle-earth Shadow of War, it showed the same sort of differences and increases, and then we look at Monster Hunter Wilds, which still isn't really playable on either device, but at least 35 FPS is an improvement for sure over the Z1 Extreme. I did 2 tests for Red Dead Redemption 2, the lowest on the slider and the highest on the slider. And you can see that there's some really good gains here on the HX370 with the Win 4 over the Z1 Extreme. Again, I don't think the highest would be playable here looking at these frame rates, but you definitely can moving a little bit lower. Shadow of the Tomb Raider had a weird result in the 28 watt low for the Z1 Extreme, and it passed the HX370 for some reason, but otherwise across the board, it's a gain. If you ignore the Ally X's bars in this, it is very interesting to see just how small of a gap there is between 18 watts and 28 watts on the Win 4. The 28 watts is almost never worth using. Lastly, we have Black Myth Wukong because I forgot I had this as alphabetical and this should have been earlier. But either way, I'm sure you're tired of me saying the exact same things here, but check out the low 18 watts. 41 FPS is a fantastic result for Wukong. And that puts you right into a locked 40 FPS territory. It'll be a lot smoother than the Z1 Extreme, and it even opens you up to a frame generation territory if you're feeling a little bit risky on that one. I honestly can't get over how good 18 watts is on the HX370. It is fantastic. All right, so what exactly is the story after all of those benchmarks? And well, for one, the 18 watts on the HX370 Win 4 is absolutely equal to or better than the Z1 Extreme in a lot of scenarios. Meaning you're getting better frame rates, you are saving on battery, you're saving on heat, you're saving on all those sorts of things by having the HX370 instead of the Z1 Extreme. So yeah, it is a better processor and by a decent amount margin because of all these things. Now, the other result is that 28 watts is fairly useless on the Win 4 or the HX370. It doesn't seem to move the needle at all, or really in ways that matter. So whereas like the Z1 Extreme, you would have 15 watts to 28 watts or 18 watts to 28 watts, and you'd see some big gains. There were some scenarios there on the HX370 where you're seeing 1, 2, 3 FPS differences between 18 watts and 28 watts on the HX370. So that doesn't really make sense for users that have the HX370 or the Win 4 2025. I would just stay with 18 watts because you would save a whole bunch on, like I mentioned before, battery, heat, all that sort of thing. And you don't get much of a gain going to 28 watts, especially with how loud the fan noise is on the Win 4. You want to cut that back as much as possible. So with all of these gains and upgrades, I guess the question that you probably have is it worth it to upgrade to an HX370 device over the Ally X, for example? Is there enough of a gain here to do so? And there is some nuance in this question. Obviously, the price points of the HX370 devices is a lot more than an Ally X, so you are going to be paying that. Plus, it's not just a straight extra $400. You have to sell and upgrade, all that sort of thing. But I don't know if it's there. I don't know if it's enough to say that you should upgrade for those performance gains. More so that it should be something that excites you for this year when we see more devices with this chip or better chips coming, because we don't know what the Ally 2 is going to use. And if it's going to use this or whatever is better than this, that should get you very excited for this year. I'll leave all the fan noise and all that talk about the Win 4 for the review that I do on it. There is a lot that I have to say about this device, and we'll talk about it then. But today's video was more, I wanted to see the performance differences between the two, and now that we have, there is absolutely a difference there. 18 watts is exciting on the Win 4 compared to the 28 watts on the Ally X. And as you saw in the benchmarks, it ends up being a really good thing. So get excited for this year when we see some devices that can make use of this. But the exciting thing to you should be the battery. Let's talk about battery now. So I suppose the question is, if 18 watts is equal to 28 watts, then how does that affect battery? Because now you're not using 28 watts of power. Does it end up being an equal scenario here? The Ally X, remember, has an 80 watt hour battery. The Win 4 has a 46 watt hour battery. That is almost double of the two in difference of battery here. So in your mind, you're like, well, yeah, the Ally X's battery is going to be better. Obviously, it's an 80 watt hour battery. But we don't need to hit 28 watts on the Win 4 to equal the Ally's power. We can do that at 18 watts. So now suddenly it becomes, well, does 80 watt hours of battery having to run at 28 watt hours at a TDP equal 46 watt hours of battery having to run at an 18 watt TDP. Now, napkin math would tell you that 46 watt hours of battery divided by 18 watts of TDP would equal about 2 hours and a half, two and a half hours, if we did napkin math. If we did the same for the Ally X, 80 watt hours of battery, and you had to use 28 watt hours of TDP, you'd be looking at about 2 hours, 51 minutes, or just under 3 hours. So there is already a difference there, just napkin math. Now, obviously, that's not going to be the real world scenario. 18 minutes separating the two is good, but that's napkin. So let's look at a real world test. So what I did here was I took the Ally X at 28 watts and the Win 4 at 18 watts. I ran Assassin's Creed Origins on both. Same settings, same everything, so I made sure it was all the same. And the results were actually surprising. The Ally X managed an hour and 42 minutes because it was mostly hitting 39 and 40 watts because it needed more than the 28 watts to do what it was doing. So it's even at 40 watts, not even a clean 2 hours. It is an hour and 42 minutes before it died. On the other hand, the Win 4 managed an hour and 30 minutes, while it was mostly hitting 29 to 30 watts. So again, it is all relative. It still needed more than that 18 watts, whereas the Ally X actually needed more than 28 watts. So same thing, but that is the point of the test. Now, the absolute surprising part about this test is there's a difference of 12 minutes between the two devices. Now, that should be exciting to a lot of people. That basically means that the battery, the 46 watt hour battery that is in here, because we don't have to run it at the high TDPs that the Ally X does, you are getting very similar battery life to a device that has double the battery size. It is super exciting in that way. And this isn't scientific in any way, shape, or form. There are going to be scenarios where that 80 watt hour battery comes out ahead by a lot more than just 12 minutes. But in games like this, in scenarios like this, we're talking about 12 minutes in difference. It's not a lot at all. That means now that devices that are running HX370s at 46 watt hour battery sizes become a lot more attractive than they were before I did this test. I would have never looked at the 1X Fly, for example, the F1 Pro. I wouldn't have looked at like the newer GPD Win Mini, the Win 4, all these sorts of things. But looking at it from a different lens now of not needing the same amount of TDP that you needed before to get playable frame rates, to get games to run great, that changes a lot of things. But now imagine this. Imagine an 80 watt hour battery inside of a Win 4. Or just put the HX370 inside of an Ally X. We would be looking at 3 to 4 hours of battery life. Actually, yeah, 3 to 4 hours of battery life for the games that right now are getting 1.5 to 2 hours of battery life. Just by that alone, just by swapping the CPU for an HX370, because we can run it at a lower TDP and get the same or better performance. That is crazy. This isn't even the best case scenario, and it's also not even the worst case scenario. You could go down to 15 watts if you wanted. You can keep going lower if you wanted. You could match the Ally X's frames by going to, 14, 13 watts maybe, and getting that performance if you so wanted to. But it's just crazy to look at the performance gains, the battery gains from these two chips, and get excited for this year. So anyways, at the risk of continuing to say the exact same thing over and over and over again, the too long didn't watch end of this video is 18 watts is the new 28 watts. And going forward, devices this year, anything that comes out that's going to have a similar CPU or better than the HX370 should be very exciting. And I personally cannot wait for that because better battery life, better heat, better thermals, better performance, all of that are things that I want to see. Those are really the only negatives for an Ally X besides the screen and wanting an OLED screen. If we take care of those two things, and hopefully ASUS is cooking up something nice, that should be very exciting. On the other hand, devices like the Win 4 and other devices that are coming out, the 1X Flies and all of that in the world that are using the HX370, if they can price them right and not at the current prices that they're at, because I think they're a little bit too expensive, they become very attractive where they weren't when they were competing with the Ally X a year ago on the 8840U and all that sort of thing. It's an entirely different ballgame now, I think. That's all I have for you today. Joey's Retro Benchmarks. One video every year where we look at just charts, because why not? Don't forget to like and sub to help the channel grow. Come join me on the Discord to talk all about handhelds, but not benchmarks. Support me on Patreon if you like my stuff. And hope you all have a good one.